I'm Shelley, and I'm with Ability Magazine and the Ability Collective. So, years ago, I think 30 years ago now, I was in California. I was a casting director, and I learned that I had brain tumors. So, I took myself out of the fray and moved home. And years later, I ended up having a brain tumor in my brainstem that ruptured, and it had to be surgically removed. So in that time frame, that first year, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. So I put my resume up on Ability Jobs, thinking maybe I'll get a hit. And they called me themselves and said, "Hey, would you work for us?" So I went to work for Ability, and that was in 2016. And then in July of this year, they were talking to me about what happened with Netflix, what Chet had mentioned earlier, and we kind of married the two, my experience with casting as well as my life experience, and we're working on Ability now. So that's my focus with the company.
Very much. Thank you. So, if anyone has any questions for the group, I know there's a lot there. So, yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them or have the.
If while you're While you're thinking of a question, I just wanted to, there was a mention about football, NFL, there was a mention about Gallaudet, but what they didn't mention is this combined storyline that Gallaudet football invented the huddle. So they were competing with another football team, and that was also through a deaf university. And they realized the other team was seeing the sign language, so they huddled in to sign to each other, and that created the huddle. So just wanted to share that interesting tidbit. So if you don't have a question, we're going to point to you and make you ask a question.
Well, I'd like to ask Leanne a question. So you just started this recently. So what inspired you, and where do you see your agency, in like 2 or 3 years from now?
What really inspired me is the social mission to amplify voices that are not usually heard, to bring women and people of color into video sets and the processes, creative processes, really seeking them out and joining all of these, getting involved in the groups and finding, just curating diverse teams is really what I wanted to do with Phoenix. And in a few years, I see us having a full-time staff, having a building, a place where artists can come together, artists of different abilities, of the spectrum of individual experiences and stories. And I would really love to see it as a South Bay community, but that can have a global reach of sending out our work across the world.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thank you all so much for being here. This was amazing. I honestly was going to leave. I had to put my kids to bed, but then I told my husband, there's another section. Can you please put them to bed tonight? I want to hear it, and I'm really happy that I did, so thank you. Do you guys find that educating people is your biggest challenge in getting people to understand what you're doing, or do you find that once people know what you do, they immediately jump on it? Where do you feel like we sit today in terms of kind of public acceptance for what you're doing?
There's a reason why we call it transforming expectations. I think particularly when it comes to autism, there is greater awareness and acceptance today, but fear and lack of understanding is still pervasive. So I think there's a long way to go, but I think we've come a long way in the last few years as well.
Great question. As Leanne said, birds of a feather flock together. It's just part of human nature. So for us, if we're dealing with employment, we created a whole program from storytelling to the volunteer program to demonstrate to community, because we build houses across the country, and the community changes their view when they see volunteers with disabilities building a home. I mean, it's very extreme volunteerism to have first-time volunteers with disabilities doing something. We've had people that literally they're blind on the roof of homes. We don't tell them to go up there; they're the wrong homes, but we still. So these are jokes, folks. But we really have had people blind on the roof and working really difficult assignments and sweating in the heat, sometimes raining. But the experience of that with another volunteer that's come off from, let's say, a corporation volunteer coming over, that joining of forces, everyone's life changes. It's a multiple win situation. The person volunteering gets to give back to community. It's always better to give than receive. And the volunteers working side by side some people have said we'll never even use the word disability again. The difficulties are, as was just mentioned, fear, ignorance. I think ignorance is epidemic, but it's curable. And there are just different strengths that you have to have tenacity. I'm sure you guys are dealing with a lot of that, trying to prove you prove yourself now, but still fighting that uphill battle. We've actually had companies say we're not ready to hire people with disabilities. It's been 30 years since the ADA, and they still are concerned about hiring. Lots of misinterpretations, everything from we can't fire somebody if we hire somebody to just some strange things going on in their mindsets. As you're saying, things seem to be slowly changing, but gosh, it is taking so much time. I didn't think I'd be doing this 30 years later. I actually thought we'd be out of business already and we wouldn't be needed, but we definitely are still needed.
I'm going to add on to that. I think that people, once you educate people about it, they really embrace the idea, but it's still taking the time and the effort of finding the people, the right people. They are sometimes balk at maybe the time that it takes because they want a quick we're in the age of wanting something right away, and it does take some more thought and additional steps in the process because it's not a normal part of the process. So people intellectually embrace the idea, but in practice it doesn't always happen.
I feel I have to say something because everyone else did. I think the fear that people up here are talking about is tangible for me. I see it every day. People are not sure what to say. Etiquette seems to be the thing that I deal with the most, and just brings up a story. This little girl was standing outside of a restroom stall, and her mother was inside, and I was washing my hands, and she said, "Mom, there's a wheelchair in here." And she said, "No, hon, there's a girl in a wheelchair in here." So I think it's teaching younger people that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask the person you're talking to or talking about a question. We're not gonna bite.
All right, I got a couple more questions back here. Again, thank you everyone who's up on the panel today. If you all had a call to action for the people in this room, at the end of this day, what do you want us to go home with? We can start on the left. My left, sorry. You're right. There you go.
I think the call to action, specifically for Exceptional Minds, but I suspect for the theme, is really to look at look at things differently and look at ways to bring, in our case, individuals with autism into your workplace. I think we've shown that people who are differently abled or process things differently or look different can accomplish just as much as everybody else. Working on over 200 film and television projects alone shows that individuals with autism can be effective digital artists, and you know what? That goes beyond Hollywood. So specifically for exceptional minds, that's what I would say.
I think that's the same with us. Think about if you're ever hiring, why not try Ability Jobs or actually Ability Job Fair if one is coming up. We usually do about 4 a year. And everyone get on your phone and like us on Instagram and Twitter right now. Gosh, you guys are a tough audience. It's late, and the jokes are not funny. So that I get a laugh for. Okay. Yeah, so I think you need to keep in mind, you were mentioning it earlier about it's not, you have to think about this. It's not natural to do what we're asking. You have to take another step. But you'll be happy you did, from whether it's hiring through Exceptional Minds, if you're needing really talented people like that. And I met some of them just recently at the event in LA. So it was just lights, camera, access. And gosh, the portfolios that we were looking at were just incredible. So if you're ever looking for that, again, post jobs on abilityjobs.com, and rethink this, because it will affect your lives, your family, parents, even people in the room are probably, some people with hidden disabilities might be a little bit more, have a more affinity to what we're talking about, but it is part of the fabric of our lives.
I totally agree. Curating these diverse teams, actively seeking out people, a diversity of people, and I would add on making sure that you have processes in place in your organization to make sure those people can really bring all of their capabilities to the table and that they're supported in amplifying their voice in contributing to the organization. And so in putting together projects, find the right people, and if you don't have the resources or the knowledge to do it yourself, hire me and go to these go to these other organizations and make sure that you're doing the legwork, because it's hard the first few times. It's hard, but it becomes easier, and it needs to be normalized. And then just make sure that the work environment themselves are conducive to including the people that you've hired.
So I'm going to talk again. I would say seeing anybody's ability, that's across the board. Anyone has ability to do something. And I was talking with a woman on a plane last week, and she said, my granddaughter has a food allergy, but it's not really a disability. And I said, that's kind of what we're talking about. Nobody really has a disability without an ability. There's something that everybody really, really loves, has affinity for, has passion about. Look at those things. Don't concentrate on what somebody can't do.
Well, first off, I just wanted to thank Brian and everybody here tonight, because I can't tell you how energized I am by all these discussions. I mean, other than my lack of performance on the closed caption panel, it was really quite an evening. Now, this is coming from a father who has a son with special needs, and I guess the question would be, Jeff, you mentioned that autism is the lion's share of the kids that are in your program. Are there other Are there other like special needs kids that are in there other than autism?
Our program is exclusively for individuals on the autism spectrum. We've developed a pedagogy and a curriculum that is effective with the population we're serving. It doesn't mean that certain aspects of it wouldn't translate, but our expertise is really in the area of autism and related disorders. Yeah.
I really have to applaud you. What we are talking about here, what you are representing, is people with visible disabilities. There are a lot of people who have invisible disabilities, people with chronic diseases, children, with cystic fibrosis or some other illnesses. When they graduate school and they're applying for a job, they cannot admit that they have a disability, because if they admit they have a disability, they have some sort of illness, then they won't be hired, because the employer, immediately the antenna goes up, oh, this person is going to be sick all the time, and she's not, or he is not going to perform well. So then, okay, they hide it, but once they start to work, then they get into a situation, oops, I need to be hospitalized. I won't be able to work for 6 weeks. And I think this is the mentality that people and hiring managers and recruiters, they really have to change their mind, that there are so many brilliant people with invisible disabilities as well, and they shouldn't exclude these people,
So our program actually is anonymous, and so it allows people to post their resumes, and a company can look at the resume, but they can't connect to that because everything's stripped out with the contact. So a person that is fearful, the good thing about our system, and we tell everyone, post your resume everywhere else as well. Don't just stay with us. But we're not an aggregator, so only companies that are actively seeking qualified people with disabilities use our system. So those companies are actually looking for that talent. There's a relatively new law called Section 503, which indicates that makes companies that are federal contractors or subcontractors, which is basically most companies in the United States, have to have a utilization goal of 7% of their workforce. So with this new legislation, they have to identify what they're doing, they have to show the numbers, they have to do the compliance reporting. So there is a movement right now that actually there's a benefit in a strange way to be able to be in the system if they have a disability for employment. With low unemployment rate, the companies are actively looking all over the place for talent. So we're seeing our numbers increase because of that, I think. So there is a stigma, there is a fear, there's all kinds of things, but using our system allows that. So a company decides to want to connect to that person, it's an internal message that occurs, and then only the job seeker allows that person to connect if they say, yeah, I want to try to talk to that company. So we try to remove that stigma.
I have a question for Leanne. I've heard a few stories recently, young women that I know that are treated differently, either at work or a PhD program because they're women. And do you have resources where it's not something that there's no one that they can get help with in this situation, but it affects them because they're women? And is there like a resource that
Yes,
they can
I
go
do
to?
have a resource for workplace problems, just like you're describing. A friend runs a program that's actually started in San Francisco, and the name of it slips my mind at the moment, but I'll give you my card.
Okay,
and
thank
get it
you.
to you. You're welcome.
I'll take an action that anything that you want to, I already have your websites and contact information, so I'll make that available to everybody on the meetup. And if you guys have any further questions that you want to ask them or find some other way of getting involved in organizations, all of them. They'll all be available on the meetup, and we are going to post these videos hopefully within a week, and we'll have all links to their websites. Get away from that speaker. Links to their websites and other information on our YouTube channel, which is the Silicon Valley Video Producers YouTube channel. Does anybody want to ask any other questions of the panel? Okay, it is a little late. I thank you all for hanging in here. I hope you found this inspiring and useful. I certainly did. And I really want to thank each and every one of you guys for coming out. These guys all had to travel to get here. It was not an easy thing to do for everybody. So thank you, and thank you very much, Christian. It's great to hear from you today as well. And yeah, last chance. Any other questions? Okay, let's say thank you very much. Big hand.